Hello and welcome to the Sea of Startups, where we dive into the stories behind the startups in Southeast Asia. I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin, managing partner of Indelible Ventures. Now, if you're a founder or funder looking to learn more about what drives the startups in Southeast Asia, this podcast is for you. We're about to sit down with founders to uncover the unique insights into the origins and motivations behind launching their startups. We'll uncover the stories behind the struggles, the ups, the downs, guided from the view of an entrepreneur. So, without any further ado, let's jump into today's show. All right, I am very happy today because my guest is Chris Fong, the co-founder of FeFiFo. For those of you who don't know, FeFiFo is a technology-first co-farming company that focuses on the empowering of the next generation of progressive farmers throughout ASEAN. Thank you very much for being here, Chris.
Hi, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for having me, actually.
Excellent. So I ask every founder that I ever meet, I always am intrigued by the founding story. So take me back. What got you on the entrepreneurial journey in the first place, and what led to FeFiFo?
Right. Actually, this is a story this is the favorite story from my co-founder. So me and my co-founder, we are very old-time friends. We've known each other for more than almost 2 decades now, and he's married to my friend-in-law. So he's a serial entrepreneur. He started his business when he was 18, just fresh out of school, a media company, and he slowly grew it into quite a powerhouse. And eventually they managed to sell it to WPP, which is one of the biggest media companies in the world. And I've always been the corporate side of things, right? So 12 years of being in the hamster wheel. Focus a lot on technology, process re-engineering, systems design, etc. And we've always had a very healthy respect towards for each other and what we do. And around 2017, that was when he finally exited from his sale, because when he sold, he had a 5-year retainer to stay on as the regional CEO for then Grey Digital. And I was on my way out of GIC, which was my last corporate job, and I was heading into a master's in technopreneurship in NTU. So around that time, we were talking, what do we want to do next with our lives? And naturally, we started talking about whether or not we want to come together to do something. That was when he kind of suggested that we should look into agriculture. Interestingly, my first response to him was, you must be mad. Both of us are city boys. I have personally never grown anything that survived. I'm not sure about him, but I have black thumbs at that time. So how would we possibly be able to do something in agriculture? And his response to me was, I know what you mean, right? But let's not write it off immediately. I've got a couple of very close friends in Malaysia. He's Malaysian, who are smallholder farmers themselves. And I know of these two guys, right? They have been together, and they have started farms and operating farms for a good 4 or 5 years, as far as I knew back then. And from what I know is that they have done this 4 times. Each time it was going through the same cycle, right? It started with a bang. They found some rich investor who has land, who has money. They ended up just being an employee, because the guy was saying, you're using my land, you're using my money, so I take 95% of the profits. Mm-hmm. You guys go and do, right? And it always starts this way. It starts with a bang. They build up, they grow. The first couple of cycles, fantastic. They sold. I've been to some of their farms, so I know that they can grow. So they grew things like tomatoes, they grew things like cucumber, okra, and they did a very good job. But interestingly, is after always around 2 plus 3 years, things start to come down, and then it fails. And then the cycle starts over and over again. And that piqued my interest. So, you know what? I know these two guys. I know what they've been through. So let's go and find out from them what their problems were. So what ended up was, we had about 4 months, I believe, flying up to KL every other week. And whenever we are there, we would, just lock ourselves up in an Airbnb for 4 months. Mm-hmm. And we would really talk about, not 4 months, 4 days. And we would not step up. we will order food in. We'll just really just huddle and talk. And I think that at the end of that 4 months was a very clear understanding on what most or all, in fact, all smallholder farmers face, which is basically the key value chain, risk issues that we help solve for farmers. Basically, they lack funds, they lack land, they seldom have the know-how for modern farming, and even if they do, they don't have the access to funds to build them. And last of all, market. And because these smaller farmers, they're very small teams, they are the farmers themselves, they are their CFO, they are their inventory manager, they are their sales manager. When they handle one thing, they have no time for others. And usually the cycle goes this way is because they find themselves very entrenched in their operations, and there's no time to really go and build more sales cycle. So the problem with the current environment and the dynamics of the industry here is that if you go to a buyer and they say, I've got ready harvest in hand, such great stuff, the guy knows that you got to sell, or these things are perishable, right? So they have no qualms undercutting you. You have ready harvest in hand, okay lah, 5 ringgit lah, take it or leave it. And that kind of forms that vicious cycle. They have got one sale which doesn't bring them enough money. They don't have enough money for the next cycle. They start cutting corners, yields start to drop, quality starts to drop, and that basically spells the beginning of the end. So these are all the problems that we uncovered from them. And we realized that this is actually a process issue. This is an issue that can be solved through digital means, through standardization, through kind of like a shared service where they don't have to pay the full amount for full team, full facilities, but can benefit from a larger organization that has got all of that, and they pay on a per use or as a service kind of basis. That was the first, I suppose, motivation, or the first inspiration for what co-farming is today.
Okay, so you basically took each of your entrepreneurial and your corporate background and started recognizing the process flows associated with it, not necessarily immediately on kind of the modern farming, but really on kind of those process pain points along the pathway in regards to land, access to funds, the go-to-market, the undercutting on the prices is, as you highlighted, because they're perishable. You always hear the story within agriculture that the smallhold guys always get undercut and the big players are kind of flooding the market. So then what's the next step? So you look at this and you identify the problem statements. And so how do you come about building the solution then?
Yeah. So on hindsight, it felt like it was, it's going to sound like it's a very structured approach, right? But in reality, it was just going along and realize that we have a certain risk point here. How can we manage it? I mean, the easiest solution to land on was, okay, if they don't have modern, crop systems and infrastructure, then one of the things that we can do is to take a leaf out from co-working or central kitchen. Let's build those farms and lease these ready-to-farm spaces, so that immediately, that high capex is translated to a monthly, affordable, reasonable OPEX. But then, if you start thinking into the process and looking from the angles of this smallholder farmer, you will realize that you cannot simply just give them a ready greenhouse with, all the crop systems set up and expect that, they will achieve success. What will they grow? If you let them decide, what they were to grow, they could end up growing things that are not profitable, leasing a space that may not commensurate with the profitability of a crop. And so that kind of led us to the decision that, okay, we have to curate the crops and make sure that the farm space that they lease is for a curated crop that's standardized for crop growing of, say, melon or chili. Then we started asking ourselves, okay, then in that case, how about their agri inputs? We have to standardize them. We've got to standardize the seeds, we've got to standardize the inputs, and that all has to dovetail into their SOP. How do we do that? Okay, can we have digital SOPs that's some way they can access easily, so everybody growing the same crop has got the same set of instructions that they have to follow? So fine, then our system probably needs a way to easily create bite-sized, understandable SOPs that if we were to update in one place centrally, everybody gets it. That means something that's in the back office, something on a mobile. How about finances? Do we give them kind or do we give them money? If we give them money, they'll run away. So, but if we give them kind, then it's also not, the most optimized, because you end up giving the same set of inputs over and over again, whether or not previous cycle they overuse or they had some savings. So the preferred is to give them an amount of money, and they manage it so that they have accountability. They know that this is what I have to buy. I have so much left over from last cycle, so I can buy less this cycle. I have so much, or I've overused on this particular item, but I've underused on this particular, so I balance it up. This is then the preferred way. Then but we cannot give them cash. So we need to build a digital wallet with a digital balance, where the money is in our bank, but the balance is for them to manage, and so on and so forth. So all of these was just basically thinking from their angle and their challenges. How would they behave versus what do we need to manage in terms of risk on the entire value chain? And that's how we figured out, or at least built our digital platform, which we call DDFN, to what it is today.
Okay, I love the systematic breaking down of these points, but I do wonder when you talk about standardizing. I mean, it's one thing to standardize the inputs, like the seeds, and what the anticipated output is, but when you start trying to standardize the SOP in regards to the cultivation of the crops, you start running into the common problem with that any company that tries to standardize procedures is to ensure that people are following it to the letter. So when you look at that component of it, how do you ensure that people are going to follow the instructions, that they're going to read and make sure that they're doing 1, 2, 3 in the proper order with the proper measures, et cetera, et cetera?
That is one of the questions that we ourselves ask. So, and you now start to realize, right, as you go through into the details, they say the devil is in the details. It's true. As you go into it, you start thinking, hey, then how about this? How about that? One of the key questions was, in fact, like what you said, how then do we ensure, even if we give them digital SOPs, even if we build digital processes that guide them necessarily towards a direction, doesn't mean that they follow. Two things. One is, do they know how to use? There's a digital process, there's a structure, there's a flow. But the user always manages to break a system, right? You build it in a way, you give it to them, the first thing, pop, they find a way to break it.
Oh yeah.
So that's the thing. One is, can it be intuitive enough for them to use it the way it's intention? And what are some of these recent controls that we have in place to ensure that it is not being used as in a way that we didn't intention for it to be used? That's number one. And number two is, how then do we have better control and enforcement of standardization? So one is obviously building our DDFN process flows in a very intuitive way, using language and lingo which smallholder farmers understand. Right? Rentals very easy, pay workers very easy, pay temp harvest pickers very easy, start cycles, start stages, record your harvest, assign roles to workers, record how much you have picked, sort, packed, and submit for delivery. So we use lingo and use processes that they themselves are used to and they are familiar with, so that they already can anticipate. Number one. Number two is the decision to build nucleus co-farms instead of bringing our system like what many other agri-tech players do, who focuses on building a hydroponic system or indoor system, is to build a nucleus co-farm. 20-25 acres is the sweet spot. We built these farm spaces within our own perimeters, and these agripreneurs and workers then reside and work in our co-farms, where we have crop experts and farm op admin executives in there, helping them, guiding them on a daily basis. And to also add on to the processes, we have got a number of WIPs or progress meetings a week, where by crop we are meeting these agropreneurs and talking about first one, performance and progress. Second one, what the key SOP steps for the next week. So that's how we manage it. So think like an accelerator program. I actually took this inspiration from Entrepreneur First, which I actually, participated in sometime before I started FeFiFo.
Okay.
Entrepreneur First takes two strangers, put them together, form a founder team. And they are expected to then figure out what is the company that they will found and what's the problem they will solve, how are they going to solve it. And you can imagine that in this kind of scenario, a lot of guidance is required. So it was a 3-month program. Everybody went to the same place. They have got entrepreneur in residence, and we call our crop experts agronomists in residence to basically guide them on a weekly basis, progress, setting, goal setting. This week you have to accomplish one, that week, make sure that everybody's on track. So that's how we run things in co-farms.
Okay, so you maintain your own staff on location at all times, to where you essentially have these, the agripreneurs, independent operators, or what the terminology that you put to it. They're basically coordinating with your staff. So it's if you were to launch multiple locations, each location is going to end up having these on-site FeFiFo direct employees.
Yes. And it's a very sustainable model. The 1 or 2 agronomists in residence that is well versed in the crop that co-farm grows can basically support one co-farm of 10, 15, 20 acres.
Okay. And so then, when you look at that 20 to 25 acres, you're partitioning it up. Is there kind of a rule of thumb of how much acreage an individual can take on?
Yeah. Within horticulture, which is short cycle cash crops, I think the sweet spot will be the crops that grow on open farms. I think we call them open farm spaces, usually have good unit economies at 2 acres. Whereas the greenhouse crops, those that are growing under a greenhouse, these farm spaces have good economies within for 1 acre. So we usually have 1 acre greenhouse spaces, 2 acre open farm spaces. Currently, we have a 2 acre chili farm space and a 1 acre greenhouse farm space. And we're doing R&D already on hydroponics greens, which likely is going to be a 1 acre greenhouse farm space as well.
Okay. So am I understanding correct that because of the specifications of standardizing the inputs through the SOPs of the process down to the go-to-market, that you likely go product by product as far as what you're putting in as capabilities, whether it's melons, leafy vegetables, whatever the case may be. You're essentially going one by one to make sure that you can standardize all of it. So when you're R&Ding, that's in order to introduce a new crop into under the umbrella of FeFiFo, yeah?
Absolutely. And what we have built, essentially, our proprietary technology platform, makes this whole process easy. Our DDFN helps us model a particular crop. So every aspect of cost and revenue is modeled in, and we are able to do cycle and cycle cash flow simulations for maybe up to 5 years to see how the P&L is like, to really figure out, okay, so this number of workers, this kind of acreage and planting points, this set of inputs, this amount of crop cycle duration, how does these numbers play out with each other? Then, of course, the SOP creation on a digitalized, centralized space. And most importantly, DDFN is also our operating system, where we basically coordinate and have a view across all our agripreneurs, even though they are different farm spaces in different locations, to be able to see across what their needs are in terms of finances, pay workers and all that stuff, pay themselves, inventory purchases, sales for delivery, etc., where we can batch them together and plan them and execute them as a batch, so that we can achieve economies of scale and scope for them. So this is how we basically manage it. You're right. Every crop we will have to trial a particular SOP to make sure that SOP works, because garbage in, garbage out, right? What the
Sure.
DFN effectively is a operating system that helps to make this all easy. But the content is still something that we have to develop. So an SOP for a particular crop has to be fit for purpose, has to be high performing. Then we digitalize and standardize on that on our platform, and then manage it from there.
Okay. And what role does IoT devices play into this? Do you have devices that are measuring like the nutrients in the soil, maybe cameras doing visual inspection? What level, to what extent are you incorporating these sort of technologies?
At the beginning, we started with everything manual except for digitalized processes. So how they manage their finances, inventory, crop cycle, how they record their harvest and submit that for sales. All of that data, all of that process flows is managed through a mobile app, which they all have to use. But the farm operations is manual steps, so to speak. But having said that, we are already using modern crop systems like fertigation. So you can imagine huge water tanks. You mix the nutrients, but you turn on a pump, and that kind of fertigates like 9,000 planting points at the same time at a particular EC. And when you turn the pump on for a fixed amount of time, because we are using commercial, systems, the dripper has a drip rate. You can easily calculate. Okay, 10 minutes means 300 ml. All right. So the SOP prescribes that from day 23 to day 42, EC of 2.8 or 3.2, 2,500 liters a day. 300 ml at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 water, 2 water, 3, 4 EC again, up to that kind of details. And the workers and the agripreneurs are then managing it manually. And it's working. But we also recognize that there are some of these areas which are high, low effort, easily automated, but very high risk if human errors is to occur. Things like mixing of nutrients, things like turning on the fertigation at the right time, for the right duration of time. And these are the things that we are currently already working on for IoT automation. So we're not there yet, but we are basically working on it. There are a lot of solutions, in the market that we could have possibly used, but we realize that they are also not really fit for purpose. I'll give you an example. A very popular product, I'm not going to mention name, which a lot of farmers use. It's this small little device, but it costs like I think 3,000 to 5,000 ringgit a pop just for one feed line, and it goes by ratio, which means that what you set is how much water, how much nutrient solution. Meaning that water is always fine, but the nutrient solution has to be a standard, not a variable. Then your ratio will work. 1:2, 5:1. If your nutrient solution is a little, not always very consistent, you'll end up with the EC is always a little bit off. And that's always the problem because of how farms work. You have one bag of A, one bag of B, you put it in the nutrient tank. You basically look at the tank, right, and realize it's very low already or below the line. Then I just put 2 bags in, I just fill it up with water. It's never down to the exact science. It's always going to be a little different. So we thought that we could do something ourselves. So currently the team is working on IoT deployment in these areas, basically nutrient mixing and fertigation start-stop. And we will be adding, and once we achieve these low-lying fruits, we'll be adding on to it. Like, for example, can we hook up to a weather station that figures out it's going to rain within the next 2, 3, 4 hours? Then should we fertigate, should we not, etc., etc.
Okay. So I find that fascinating how you've gone through all of that. When it comes to the actual farmland, are you the owner of the farmland? Are you leasing it out? So when you're talking about these 20 to 25 acreage locations, is it your land, or how are you coming across the land?
lease, but we do long-term lease. Like for example, right now our pilot co-farm, we have 18 plus 6. So that's 24 years. And you need that kind of long-term lease before you can justify any amount of capex beyond just sprinklers.
Sure.
And that is really one of the problems that smallholder farmers face. By themselves, they're not able to commit to this kind of leases, and the kind of land that they take is too small for that kind of leases as well. But as a co-farming entity who's running co-farms, whose business is to build ready to farm spaces, we are in the position to do that. And once we take down long-term lease, we're able to then put in the kind of necessary capex to build modern farms. Yeah.
Okay. Because so essentially you're able to aggregate a whole bunch of smallholder farmers into a single co-farming operation. So, a common thing is, a person ends up doing it for a few years and then ends up wanting to do something else, or moving to the city or whatever the case may be. So by having the aggregation, you're able to fill it in, replace it, maintain the economics relative to the capex that it took you to get there in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's transition to the end of this process flow, the go-to-market. So when you end up getting the output, how does FeFiFo enable the go-to-market of the end product, of the produce or the fruits or vegetables?
We do it like every commercial. We have a sales team. We hit the buyers, and we have buyers at various levels, depending on the crop, depending on the yield that is coming out from the farm spaces as well. And we basically market our crops. So this is a marketing function which smaller farmers couldn't have afforded or have the headcount for themselves, which we now have for them. And because of us, as our core business is in the business of standardization, we can go to these buyers and say, we have farm spaces that are all built like this. We've got farm spaces that are producing yield like that. All of them are going to look like this. All of them is going to be this weight, this kind of quality. We've got grade A, of course. We have got grade B. Let's not be unrealistic about it. But you can imagine that this. You can be rest assured that the quality is going to be like this. The percentage of grade A, non-grade A is going to be around these levels as well. We go to these buyers with this kind of confidence, this kind of data. We're able to show them, okay, we have got 2 plots of melons right now. This is the schedule of harvest and delivery across these 2 plots. How does this fit your buying cycle? So we have data points. We hit them with all these data, and we plan with them. And many of these buyers, they appreciate that as well, because then it's refreshing for someone to not just turn up at your door with something to sell. We can work with them to anticipate this kind of cycle and balance out their other buying channels with other people.
Okay. So looking forward, because essentially you're in an area that is relevant, not just at the Malaysia level, not just at the regional level, but really a global problem. So when you're looking forward and saying grand vision, how do you define success as an organization when you're looking from this grand vision standpoint?
Good question. Some days I think that this is our vision is too small. Some days I think our vision is too big. You don't know. Depends on how you decide that you wake up from the bed.
I think that's a pretty common thing for most entrepreneurs. It depends upon which side of the bed you woke up on.
Yeah, correct. We've always been very faithful to the initial vision when we first, started talking about FeFiFo and putting the whole, model and vision and mission together. Not just how we do things in terms of standardization, but also our goals. We've always wanted to be a region, or at least the first stop we know that we need to reach is a regional player. We want to be in every Southeast Asian country. We've done our numbers, we've done our modeling. We feel that even at 5,000 acres of self-operated co-farms, it's a very small slice of the pie. And we want to also push push that scale out through licensing, because we believe that if it is a lucrative business for FeFiFo, it's going to be a lucrative business for someone else. We are able to model our license our model and our technology together with all the crop models inside, if you happen to be in the same country, the same climate, for someone to run white label co-farm. So our targets have always been 5,000 acres of self-operated co-farms across 6 Southeast Asian countries in 10 years, and 10 times that acreage through licensing. And that will basically let us have 2 revenue streams that are almost equal, 50-50%.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How much does it play? Because when you start talking about all the standardization and the SOPs, you mentioned the similarities in the climate, but when you look across Southeast Asia, there is a lot of variation in regards to what the natural environments is, what the monsoon and rainy seasons are. How does that play into being able to update your protocols and SOPs for that type of expansion?
Very good question. And like many things in life, some parts you can bring along, some parts you can't. And the parts that you can't tend to be also because in the other country, perhaps they grow or they are suitable for growing very different things. Like Malaysia is a very horticulture, short cycle cash crop kind of play. You won't find farmers or they are willing or is doing rice, corn, wheat kind of farming, where it's large scale commodity food. But when you go to Indonesia, it's a different story. Everybody does that. Horticulture is a very small piece. People are growing cassava, potatoes, corn, many of these crop rice and commodity crop cycle where the acreage is bigger, the margins are lower, and the entire way of working, in terms of the crop cycle, the equipment that you use, the people that you use are all different. For us, it basically are different opportunities, same core principles, where we translate high capex to OPEX. That's number one. And 2, we manage the entire value chain risk through standardization of space and digital processes. We stick to these core principles. Wherever we go, we just find where we can do this. And I'll be the first one to say we don't necessarily need to keep to just farming. How about higher upstream kind of process? Like for example, in Indonesia, we're looking at corn growing right now. Do we necessarily need to be corn growers? Or can we could be co-processing space where we are targeting slightly higher ex-farm process players who don't have the money to buy machineries for separating corn kernel, drying corn kernel, helping them with it and let them deal with that 500 odd, corn farmers in that particular region. So as long as we stick to these principles, we're very, very clear on what we do. Different opportunities, yes, but same core principle, which is number 1, capex to OPEX, number 2, manage value chain through standardization.
Okay. So when you look at the business, it's a common question that I ask most entrepreneurs is, you always hear the topic of the metrics that matter. How do you manage towards metrics? These sort of things. When you look at your own business, do you incorporate key metrics? And if so, how do you define them in the context of like reaching your goals?
We do, but it's not complex things that people don't understand. Right? Took me a while to understand one GMV and all that stuff. It's a good thing that I have a master's in technical leadership. For us, because we have fundamentally, although we're in the business of providing space and technology for standardization, the core business of our clients isn't growing. So necessarily our matrices are also pretty boring. Acreage and revenue per acre.
Revenue, which essentially boils down to like what your yield is and whether or not you're getting high value crops.
Correct. How many acres of co-farms or licensed co-farms? What's the revenue per acre of these co-farms? And of course, for the licensed one, translates up to the profit sharing or the royalties that comes with the licensing model.
Okay.
So that's basically it.
How big is the licensing model at this point in time, out of curiosity?
We're working on it's a midterm opportunity.
Okay.
I think the people who are suitable to be white label co-farm operators are necessarily in Malaysia. Certain Malaysian authorities, there are many authorities and agencies that are running their own farm projects.
Sure.
Many of them aren't doing great. And we are already talking to three, North Corridor, LCD in Sarawak, as well as Felda. And they're all looking at whether or not our model and our DDFN can be used as the operating system model to run their farms. But these are midterm plays.
These are all agencies that don't move very fast either.
Exactly. You will need to have people on your side that can help push some buttons as well. Thankfully, we do have them. Or besides government, I know many investors are turned off. We talk about you're relying on government for business, and thankfully not. But the other set of people are these big MNCs that themselves are in the agri-business space, probably upstream processors who will benefit to have their own contract farming network, and that's how they manage their own contract farming.
Sure.
So one of the low-lying fruits is with our current investor Jaffa, who's already having a lot of chicken farms in Indonesia, and they need to work with a lot of farmers that grow corn because chickens eat corn, right? And these are some of the low-lying fruits, or an example of a profile of an organization that could easily deploy and with much faster than a government agency to get into a white labeled co-farm space where they are contract farming certain things that they need for their own operations.
Okay, very cool. Let me wrap up here with a couple of the closing questions, the typical closing questions that I ask everyone. So the first one is there a tech tool that you just can't live without to build your business?
Yeah, when you mentioned that this is going to be one of the questions, I was thinking, can I say my own? We've effectively built DDFN as a tool that we use. Without DDFN, we cannot manage a set of decentralized co-farms, right? That's how we manage our farms. That's how we manage all their needs. Our operations, our own admin executives, both front office, back office, on farm and in KL, day in, day out, they're using DDFN to do what we do. So if you ask me one tech tool that I cannot live without, that's the one that I built.
It didn't exist at first, you built it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's going to be the next, what's that, Slack, is it? Started as a tool that they use themselves, right? But I suspect you're asking, what kind of enabling...
maybe an external tool,
Yeah. We use a patchwork of many free tools, each one for its own purpose, from wiki to virtual offices, because most of we just came off from COVID. Some argue that not yet still, but the last 2.5 years had really been remote. So we have a virtual office, we have wikis, we have mainly remote technologies, collaborative tools that we use to help the team work together.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. So the second one, the last question is, if you were to talk to another founder that's just getting started out, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you could offer?
So many. Be very sure that you're set up in life to do what you have decided to start, depending on which stage of life this person is at, be it finances, be it family support, wife or children, you will need to know that by stepping up as a startup founder, you're doing something which most of our population don't. And it is a brave move, and it can be a very rewarding move. It can be outsized returns. But be very prepared that most of us don't reach that goal. There's a lot of suffering for perhaps the same or lesser result if you're stuck to the usual routes to get a job, do well in it. I applaud you. You have decided on something which many wouldn't have chosen, and I wish you luck. But you need to know, to succeed, to even have a remote chance at succeeding, your life must be set up to support what you're going to do within the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Yeah, I think there's a number of founders out there that just get started, that come in with these rose tinted glasses, having read like some of the tech blogs, which highlight some of the mostly the positive stories, and you don't realize oftentimes it is incredibly difficult to build a startup, and the demand on the individuals that are the leadership is extremely difficult. So like family situation, your finances, you may not be able to draw a salary for a while. You may end up working full nights. You may have to travel, all of that. I think it's incredibly insightful for you to highlight that as a key piece of advice.
And everything in life just simply takes more effort. Keep up with friends, keep up with family. You just have to just draw from somewhere deep to still, make sure that you keep a balance.
Yeah. It's tough. On that note, Chris, thank you so much for being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.